Okay, pues.
All right, so now we're going to start the second round table.
Also to talk in English, but first I want to introduce you in Spanish because, titles and post jobs are tricky to translate. Así que os presento a la persona.
So let me introduce the panelists today. I will be introducing them in Spanish so that you get all the nuances. We have Martin Johnson, who is the Editorial Development Director of Dagens. How do you pronounce? DN. Fantastic. DN, which is Daily News in their language. And they come from Sweden. We've seen many interesting figures regarding his country in the presentation. We also have Esther Alonso, Marketing and Membership Program Director on elDiario.es. She's been with us for many years developing this wonderful business model. We have Gianpaolo Accardo, co-founder and CEO of Vox Europe. I think it's one of the great examples of trans-European journalism, translating articles from different languages of the European Union. He's seen many things. Many of the things we are trying to invent now, he's seen them already. You've heard Federica Cherubini before. She is the head of leadership development from Reuters Institute. And we also have here Mark Rice-Oxley. He is the membership editor, or executive editor for Readers Revenues from The Guardian.
Subscriptions, suscriptores, supporters, gente que nos apoya, partners in crime, people that join us in that public service mission called journalism. During the past decade, we've been experimenting with things, and little by little, I think we are getting somewhere. Readers are now at the center of our thoughts, and that was not the case maybe some years ago. And I want to this debate to reflect on why and how that transforms us as media outlets. First of all, out of curiosity, why in Nordic countries like yours, the readership become such easily financial support? Is it because paywalls? It is because a notion of journalism as something which much more value? Why is that?
I think it's geography. If you look at the map of Norway or Sweden, it's very far-stretched countries with a small population. There's been a very strong local culture around the local paper from the start, if we look back 50, 100 years. And the tradition of subscribing is very rooted in the culture. In a way, if you look at the UK with single copy sales, or in Spain or something, you don't have that same long tradition. That's one explanation. Another explanation is the high penetration when it comes to internet use, broadband, and the use of other streaming services. You will normally see in the research done by Federica and Reuters, for instance, that countries where you have a strong tradition, or for the past years you have subscribed to a streaming service like Netflix or Spotify, you have a higher percentage of people willing to pay for news as well. So I think it's a lot about the long-term effects of tradition and media consumption in general. It's not that we are smarter than anyone else.
And in the past few years, we've seen a bump on that. Is because the digitalization of society as such, or something happened?
I think that something has happened in the newsrooms in general in terms of confidence. That we've been talking in the industry for a very long time about, since the breakthrough of social media and the global platforms, that we should pivot to video, we should pivot to audio, we should pivot to social. Now we started to pivot to readers or listeners or whatever your audience is, that we see the value in what we do, And we don't look so much at what can Facebook do for us. We look at what can we do for ourselves instead. So I think that even though there is large differences between different markets, there are large challenges in the economic situation, in inflation and so on, I think that as an industry, if we can generalize, today there is a much stronger confidence that we should start with the journalism. We should make sure that journalism is as good as possible, as relevant as possible, as unique as possible for our readership. Then we can charge for it. If we don't have the right journalism, it's impossible to charge for it. If it's generic, if everyone has access to it, forget it. It's impossible. But if you have the best storytelling, the best presence in the foreign coverage, or the best climate journalism, or science journalism, or whatever, or local journalism, then you're in a position to be able to charge for it. Then you have to work out the models and the way that you should make sure that you have the long-term paying relationship. But it all starts with confidence in the content and the journalism itself.
What's your exact model, method, paywall, subscription, membership? How do you define your current situation, at least, but this friction?
I call it management by confusion, basically, because it's not visible for the audience. We don't have, it doesn't say on the front page, this is a paid article or this is a locked article, because I don't believe in that. If you do that, just to put up a sign and say, don't go here, you're not allowed here. I think we should invite the readers, and then we can make sure that they want to pay when they have seen a little or they've gotten some kind of acquaintance with the product. So we have three differences. We have a metered model, which is not that important, but it's there to make sure that no one gets around the other paywalls. Mm-hmm. We have a premium, which is perhaps one article a day, which is hard paywall. And we have what's been called the Swedish hybrid data-infused dynamic model, which is total confusion. But basically that we look at different parameters and we keep a story open for 3 to 4 hours, and then we put it behind the paywall if it met certain parameters.
Okay, that's interesting.
So it's no one understands it, so no one can steal it.
But that requires a lot of data team or tech team, analysts, business intelligence group working for the company. It
does, but actually we don't have a single analyst in the newsroom anymore. Because we have taught, and now Chris Moran is smiling happily here in the front row, which is the same thing as at The Guardian. We made sure that everyone in the newsroom learns about the data. I'm very clear about the semantics. We are not data-driven. I hate data-driven. We are data-informed. And everyone in the newsroom is data-informed because we can learn from the behavior and the traffic and the patterns and make sure that we make the right editorial decisions. The analysts, they build the tools for us, but we handle the data ourselves.
We'll be back to that afterwards. Let me jump to The Guardian, to Mark. Tell us a little bit, how are you performing right now? Because that model that you started doing some years ago had a lot of success. You are a reference, internationally speaking, and you achieved to bring a lot of people on board with a very editorial message, not a commercial message. How did you do that? How is it?
Thanks, Juan-Louis, and thanks for having me. I mean, I think we should remember it was by no means inevitable. When we started out on this path in sort of 2015, there were a lot of people, particularly in Britain, who were laughing at us and saying, oh, it's begging bowl journalism. And just for people who don't understand, this is
we heard that too here in elDiario. Yeah,
this is a sort of contributions model in which we keep all our journalism open and we say to readers, if you value this, then please join us as a supporter and give what you can give in order that this journalism remains open for everybody, rich and poor, to be able to read. So there's a lot of sneering, but very quickly it proved to be incredibly popular. And I think the most important thing is that at the beginning there was a strategy behind it. It wasn't just a kind of, let's launch this and hope. We had a very strong idea of who we are, who The Guardian is, and we told people about that, and I think that's the single most important thing. So, we told people we're independent, as opposed to a lot of our rivals who are owned by, billionaires or Russian oligarchs. We're truly independent. We showed people our track record and said, we hold power to account, and here are all the examples from Snowden to Cambridge Analytica to, that's what we're for. And And we stress this open model. You know, we don't want, no disrespect to those who have chosen the paywall model, but we want our work to be read by everybody. We think in this democratic era that it's actually crucially important that it's available to everybody, and it's not just a question of the elites reading the quality news and everybody else on social media. So we really tried to articulate that message and try to do so in a very brief form. You know, you don't have much time with a reader to say, this is who we are and this is what we're for. So you articulate that as quickly as you can and watch the results come in. And we've gone from a standing start of, zero in 2015 to somewhere between 1.3, 1.5 million individuals today. And I think it's no exaggeration to say it's sort of saved The Guardian.
As you have just heard, their way of approaching this is very similar to the way that we at elDiario, with you, our socios and socias, relate. Like, we're not here in order to sell you a piece of news. We're here to share with you a common space, so we need you to come on board. 1.2 million people paying for that? No, I won't.
Oh, no,
I won't.
I'm speaking in public. Oh, no. It's north of 1 million, definitely.
Okay. How did you convince the people? I mean, we've been using, and we'll talk about that later with Esther, but we've been using a lot of different techniques and ways of approaching people and convincing them that this is a model that can be done. In your country, where polarization has been also a tricky thing during the past few years, how that got into the puzzle?
Well, so you start with your strategy and you tell people who you are and what you're for, and then it's down to tactics. Then it's, okay, which are the channels we can use to give people this message? So on every article at the bottom, you say your piece. You put asks in your podcasts and on your videos and test and see, does that work? Email has become an important channel. Once you've had people signing up to your website, you can then, and as long as they've checked the right permissions, you can then approach them in an email format, again, to try and see if they share your values sufficiently so that they sign up. And then you talk about, okay, we're getting a lot of people in, how do we keep hold of them? And that's a whole series of different, it's tactics, it's, again, through communication, through talking to them, through live events, making them feel like you're listening to them, that they're part of what you're doing. So there's the incoming, and then there's the acquisition, and there's the retention, and they're both equally important.
So you know why you want the people to be a supporter of The Guardian, but do you have somehow measured why they eventually did it? What triggered their donation, then their one-off payment, their contribution? Because one thing is what do you think people think about you, and the other thing is what really the people are supporting you for.
Yeah, so there's important surveys, I think, that you have to conduct, both in terms of qualitative interviews with supporters, which we're doing all the time, and then quantitative testing on the site to see what kinds of values people respond more to. Independence is always the number one for us. It's become our superpower. That's the number one reason that people cite when you ask them, why did you become a supporter? The fact that you're independent always ranks at the top. After that, there's this kind of, well, it's only fair, I read them a lot, and after a while I really felt, I get value out of this, therefore I should pay. So there's a bit of guilt that comes into it as well. And then the other thing that you notice is, what are the moments at which we get a surge of people joining us? So during COVID, for example, I know it was the same with elDiario, people suddenly realized the value of trustworthy, reliable information. Suddenly it was information that could save your life or save the life of someone in your family. So we had a surge of arrivals at that point. And finally, I would say, whenever we do the basic bread and butter work of journalism, find out things that people don't know and tell them. In other words, investigative work. When we land a big investigative news story, and Martin said, you make sure your journalism is top quality and the rest will follow. That's particularly true of big investigative pieces. When we land a big investigative story, we have a huge new following of new supporters.
One more in this first round. You were you are a legendary newspaper with a lot of...
I'm a legendary person.
Legendary.
Not quite, not
wait
yet.
for it. So how that transition was possible? I think Catherine Weiner, the editor-in-chief, has a lot to do with that. Like he put an objective, and you were in not very good shape financially speaking. Let's say that way. I'm polite enough. Yeah. And now you are in green numbers, if I'm not mistaken. And how the readers are helping saving The Guardian?
I think we're very lucky in that Guardian reader has always meant something in the UK in the way that, Times reader or an independent reader doesn't have. The Guardian reader has this idea of someone who's committed, and in the 70s they were sort of committed to CND, they were sort of radical leftists who were committed to nuclear disarmament. In the 80s they were committed to the anti-Thatcher cause with the miners' strike, so our readers were very much left-wing UK. I wouldn't say radicals, but they had this they were synonymous with this kind of idea. And as we transitioned, don't get me wrong, the noughties, the first decade of this century was very, very difficult for us as we stopped becoming really just a UK publisher and became a global publisher. Our brand had to change, our readers changed. But we seem to attract the same kind of people who are committed to, they feel that they're more than just someone who reads news. They feel they want to be part of a cause. So as soon as Catherine Weiner decided that's what we were going to do, they responded. And, I can't stress it enough. I think 2014, 2015, we were really in an existential crisis. So there was a little bit also of urgency. We have to do something. We have to do something radical. And we're lucky it paid off.
Okay. Esther, is like...
It's very difficult to speak in English with Esther.
First of all, how is elDiario fitting in this panorama, and how also readers not saved our lives, made our life possible? And I will ask you to specifically share our story about the pandemic and how that support, again, was vital to us.
Yeah. I think our readers saved us as well. And I will explain why now. But yeah, they made this possible, these 10 years of elDiario, so 10th anniversary this year. And we're very proud of it. How we fit within this ecosystem, we've been sharing today, and there's different media outlets from all around Europe with different models. But the elDiario has a membership model, un modelo de socios, and we had that from the beginning, which I think, as you said before, has been very helpful and very is one of the keys to our success as well, I think, because one of the challenges, you were talking about tactics, I think one of the challenges is to inform and explain our business model to our readers, because especially in our case 10 years ago, membership models were not very well known in Spain, maybe a bit more in Europe, but definitely not in Spain. So we were very pioneer on that. And it was a challenge, and it still is, to transmit to our readers how their support is so valuable for us and so important that it's the guarantee for our independence, both editorial and economical. And we have over 60,000 members now, and every time we talk to them, we had some of them last week in the newsroom, and you can see how they really understand this collaboration, this compenetration between the media and the readers, and for them it's like real obvious, like, of course we read you, we have to support you, but we have other like millions of readers, and we all do around us reading us every day, and it's not so easy to explain that to them because it's complicated. And I think paying for something, in our case, paying for something that is free makes it even more complicated. This is why over these 10 years we have acquired a community of amazing members, and we're very proud of it, because even though it's hard to get new members on board, once they get on board, they stay for a long time. And I think this is related to the reasons why they become members, and it's because I think it's a very serious decision to support a newspaper, especially like us, and so this is why we established the relationship we established with them is like a long-term relationship, and this is very important in terms of a strategy as well. It's not just like one day we have an amazing offer in price and then you can join us. No, we're not looking for that. We're looking for a long-term commitment, and this is also the beauty of it. This is why we talk about community and about relationships. And yeah, one of the most amazing milestones for us was 2 years ago during the pandemic, during COVID. I think 1 week into the lockdown, or a bit less than that, we were very worried about elDiario's economical sustainability. The advertising industry collapsed, as this was a European problem or international problem. And at that time, 70% of our income was depending on advertising. And we were really worried that we might have to reduce the amount of fire people and think of a smaller project after all those years that we had been working on it. So we decided, and it sounds like when you look back now, like maybe it was not the right time for it, but we decided to increase our fee to our members. We had 8 years to do that, but we decided to do it right at the worst time, when the economic situation was not that good. It was a voluntary decision for our members. We offered them to increase their fee from 60 euros a year to 80 euros a year, so it was a lot, 33% increase. But we just say, we launched like a rescuing campaign for elDiario. We were very honest about it. We were very transparent, as like we always do with our numbers. And 97% of our members accepted the increase of their fee. We were overwhelmed. It was just unbelievable, because at a time, as I said, when we were all going through a very intense and a lot of uncertainty in our lives, economically as well, when we got millions of responses thousands of responses saying, yes, of course, how I'm not going to do that? It's a bit of like the guilt, like, of course we will support you. If you need our support, we're here for you. So that was just amazing. But that was not the only big news we had at that time. We also talked to our readers who are not members yet, and we asked them the same thing. We said, if you value our journalism, we need you now, and this is urgent. And in only 2 months, we got 20,000 members, going from 36 to 56,000. And this was all the funny, well, not funny, but what made it even more intense is that we were all at home in the lockdown. So we were just on their phones all the time, on these meets and calls, like, we could not believe what was happening, and it was just, well, I think we never expected that to happen. And yeah, that was, I would say, the biggest milestone in terms of community and members. So yeah, there is a hope for these businesses to keep on, or these business models to keep on growing, and especially at hard times when you think that maybe people are not going to react positively to it, they do. And yeah, it was just amazing.
They are. Giancarlo and Federica, I think Giancarlo, sorry. You have a panoramic view on what is being tried across Europe to do that transition from legacy traditional business models to more close to the reader ones. Do you think that there are a lot of room of growing? Because I see the numbers of The Guardian and actually the readership of elDiario. We are now in the 10 million figures every month, and we have 60-something thousand members. So the gap between one number and the other gives you hope that a lot of readers that can be members at some point. Federica, do you know there is a room, or until what point the room is there for growing membership for these kind of projects?
I mean, I think two things. One is we've been talking in the industry about subscription fatigue and a bit of just how many subscription and how many things you're going to be prepared to pay for. In some countries, is also like inflation, like other rising cost of living that, of course, then factor in with how much income do you have and what do you choose to spend it on. So there are external factors that journalists cannot really control. I think what has been interesting generally across Europe and across the world is that those that are succeeding and is in an industry that always looks to the US, the New York Times, is fantastic to actually feature examples of other publishers that are not just maybe as unique as New York Times and yet very successful example of how you do it. And I think one of the things that brings them all together is this really commitment of aligning different parts of the business around this idea of value and transparency and really thinking about what I am adding for the reader. And I would say shifting the perspective of really being audience-centric and thinking about what value is I am delivering to my audience, to ask them to pay or to support, whatever is the language. And in that sense, even the language and the messaging being very sort of consistent across different things, right? So how is important that the messaging is always the same and you really have those few seconds to tell a message, which one is that? And in many cases, news organizations are very complex machines to run and have a lot of different competing, in some cases, priorities. And it's not always that easy to align everything. But when you really stand behind the idea that is the journalism that drives that, but that you need a lot of other things, all of what we're talking about, whether it's very marketing words like funnel and acquisition and retention and tech and product, those are real things. You need those to make sure that then people, you need the data to know what people are reading and how they're engaging. And so there needs to be substance behind some of these numbers. And I think that the question in terms of what is that limit, where is the scale, it will vary a lot from publication to publication. And what is that value proposition? What are you, selling, or what are you asking people to support? And how much, and in a sense, really being good and reading the numbers and understanding that there is no such thing as the audience. Yeah. We have a lot of different audiences, a lot of different segments. And so that sort of audience research, whether it's panel and surveys, but even a small publisher who doesn't have the team to do an audience and a focus group can always do an audience survey. And if you authentic in the way you go to your audience and ask for support, I think Esther said, it's relational, right? It's not transactional, or in many cases, it's not only transactional. It needs to be a relationship with your audience. And so when you go and have a look at different segments of your audience and understand where that growth can come from, probably doesn't come from every segment, but what have you tried with different segments to engage and understand what is driving that need? So there's been recently in the industry, journalist loves buzzword, and there's always a new one. First was an engagement, then it was audience and something else. And now we talk a lot about user needs. So kind of the research of what kind of, even in the sense of within that value proposition and admission, the alignment of values that I am telling my readers what we stand for, what is a specific need that we are fulfilling in that specific moment, and therefore thinking about what is the best medium to deliver that? Is it a morning newsletter that helps you navigate the day? Is there a podcast that helps you working, that gives you a brief? Is it longer read because there is a weekend? Whatever that is really being smart in focusing on the journalism. Without that and the quality of the journalism, there's nothing. But around that, there is a lot of other pieces that works to really thinking about not every story is told the same way in every format and distributed in the same way.
Yeah. When we talk in public, we talk about our motivations, but the daily routine are full of strange passwords like funnel, churn. How is that the average reader? ARPU. If you are interested in all that technicalities, please, afterwards you have them here for the glossary, the complete vocabulary on how to develop this complex task of asking you to support us. Gianpaolo, please explain a little bit more about the model of Vox Europe and how it works and how it relates with the European public. And my first question to you is: do you foresee at some point, or what do you need to happen at some point to have a broader community, European community of readers willing to support a broader transnational European journalism? That's an easy one.
I wish I had the answer to that question. Our model is not that much original in a way that we are. Our revenue model is based on possibly three main pillars. One is membership, quite traditional. We've set up this membership scheme a couple of years ago in the full of the pandemic, which was possibly the worst moment to set up this kind of operation. But in the same time, and related to what has been said earlier also with regards to elDiario, it was a moment in which people would have had more, they would be more sensitive to topics like helping the news industry to survive the crisis, and more, let's say that the public would have been more receptive to calls for help if they were formulated in a way that was understandable and very clear. So this is what we did when we launched this membership scheme, and it worked quite well. Members have access to some content that is beyond paywall. They have access to some activities, like events that we might organize or participate to. They have access to online events. These were also they become more popular during the pandemic because it was impossible to meet people in person. So we organized online meetings with the people who were doing the stories that we've published, and the members were very interested in those because it was a distraction from their daily life, and it was also happening in a way that they were becoming familiar with through the way they were working their daily life, meaning online mostly. Am I doing something wrong? Okay.
I don't think you are the problem. Go ahead.
Okay. So another revenue source, which is a bit more particular to us, it's services to third parties, meaning that we provide a lot of translation and editorial services to our partners, which are other news organizations which we work with, either because we syndicate their content, we buy their content, or we translate their content for others, or the foundations we work with, either because they support our journalism through supporting production or translation, or because they need us to translate or disseminate what they're doing.
And you also had microphone just in case.
Okay.
Now we're talking.
Okay. Yes, and another way of is it working? Yeah. Another way of financing our content is grants. Grants for investigative journalism, grants for editorial operation, possibly in partnership with other media around Europe. And so basically these are the three pillars. we also have another way of funding the short-term operation, which is the selling of shares of the company. We do it like once a year, a small amount of share, maybe 200 shares, and we sell them to selected people, meaning that it's not like going public to the market, but we target people who we think might be interested in supporting the company, which is, by the way, a European cooperative. Something quite complicated, but it's the best way to involve both the journalists and all the stakeholders and all the people you work with or you work for. So we sell 200 shares twice a year to people that we go and propose the shares to. This is about this is for the business model, and I forgot the second part of your question.
The magic trick to European engaged community of readers.
So this is the most challenging issue we ever had to address, and we still haven't found a proper answer to that. I know that there are several people in Europe who are thinking about this, who are discussing about this. We are happily involved in all these type of discussions, and it always comes out to the same question. Does a European audience exist? We don't know. We know that there are people who are interested in, let's say, cross-border journalism that has a European perspective in tackling with the news, but we don't know who they really are and where they are. And this is the big challenge with our news organization, is how to get to the right people. We can do it through social media. We do it through partnerships with other publications that would bring to us some of their readers who are interested in the type of coverage that we offer. But a pan-European audience as such has never been really identified. We can say that in some countries it would be people who are interested in foreign news, who are interested in what happens in neighboring countries, who are interested in, let's say, the European idea, if it means something. But there is the persona, as the people in marketing talk about, is quite hard to identify. Students, people in research, in academia, people in journalists, people who are in the, let's say, how do you call them? The people who like to travel, who are basically interested in what happens in neighboring countries.
Mark, how would you say that the new model of The Guardian transformed the content of The Guardian? Did you stop doing things? Are you doing things that you didn't do before in terms of journalism, content, articles, coverages? How is the relationship between that community that is there demanding your service and the newsroom?
I would say the answer to that is no. I mean, we are doing journalism quite differently to how we were doing it 5 and 10 years ago, but that's because of different pressures on the business. And actually, Chris Moran, who in charge of our editorial innovation, would talk more fluently about that than I would. In terms of, has this business model changed our journalism? It hasn't changed it, but it does give you some indicators of the things you might want to do more of. For example, it's reinforced...
You can call it that way.
Yeah, it's reinforced our belief in investigative journalism, for example. So this time in the autumn of last year, we put out a kind of moment. It's a kind of attempt for us to pull together everything we're doing in a certain sphere and to talk to readers and supporters about this aspect. So we did it around our investigations, and it coincided with a big piece of publishing, the Panama Papers. I don't know if people remember that. And at the same time, we said to readers, look, this work takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of money, it takes legal. These people we're up against have deep pockets, So we started to really construct a story around what it takes to do good investigative journalism, the risks that are involved. And again, the response was quite, prodigious, really significant. And so when you do something like that, you think, okay, so people respond to that. Perhaps we should do more of that. But what I would quickly add is that we're not going to end up being an organization that looks at the kind of articles that generate a lot of contributions and go completely into that, and also look at the kind of articles that generate no contributions at all and throw them out, because then you end up with a terribly, it's what Martin says, that would be data-driven rather than data-informed.
And what that information, no decision-making, information says about what the people want, or feedback with more intensely, environmental issues, what's the agenda,
well,
the mindset or the agenda of the community of the Guardian?
I mean, a lot of our readers are naturally interested and alarmed by the environmental situation. They come to us for environmental news, and that sense of global alarm is something that will drive people to contribute. They think, I need to do something about this situation. What can I do apart from putting out my recycling and not flying to Madrid for journalism conferences? They think, well, maybe I can contribute to The Guardian because most of those guys seem to have the right idea about this. Now I've completely lost my train of thought. But yeah, so you mentioned the environment, and then there are other subjects which, sport, for example, is less. It's a different sort of theme altogether, and it tends to drive fewer people into our family. They still read it, they love it, but that, for example, is not a big driver of contribution. So you learn these things, and but that's not really changing our behaviour. We're still doing loads of sports coverage, despite the fact that we know it's not a big driver of contributions. And we're still doing loads of environment coverage because we know that it does. So make of that what you can.
You wanted to add something?
Yes, I think the big shift was not in when it comes to the business model, but more from the shift from print journalism to digital journalism in terms of having that as your paying base, because the digital subscribers are, in general, 25 years younger. They live in different places than the print subscribers. They are more women than men, in our case. And you can get much more information about what they are interested in. And by learning from that, you will change your journalism, and you will do different kinds. And if you're lucky, it coincides with what you want to do and what the audience is interested in. So it's... I don't think the business model in itself affects it so much, because if you go down that hole, try to work with conversion bait, to have another buzzword, and say that we think this will trick people into taking a subscription. It just doesn't work in the long run. People will realize that you were tricking them. So I think that learning from the behavior of your audience is absolutely crucial. And you can learn a lot from what you should be doing more of, because it's obviously a reader interest, obviously also something that will create a longer relationship with them, where climate is perhaps one of the most important topics for us that we have discovered in the past few years. But having the information about how people consume can teach you a lot of things. And we've done some experiments also together with The Guardian to look into the worst performance articles. Yeah. To see, okay, what do we have here? The stories that no one reads, do they have something in common? Is it something we could stop doing? Is it something that we can do better? Or is it something that is very important to journalism but no one reads it? I still haven't found a single example of the final one, but there is something you can do about, for instance, we saw that certain kind of, say, book reviews weren't performing very well. Okay, let's try to write them differently. Let's try to package them differently and present them differently, because we believe in them. We believe they are important. And you can never get rid of the 25 worst performing %. They are always there, but you can raise the numbers.
This is one of the topics that we discussed during the morning, going down to more technical things, and it is pity that not everyone that has participated in the morning discussion in our panel, but Chris Moran, he's a very inspiring person also for other newsrooms, because he provokes you with this kind of idea. Let's stop analyzing what people read the most, and let's think about why people are not reading this and this that we made. So I'm sure that you sometimes have a look to the column in the front page of every newspaper saying the most read articles, right? But actually, it is much better to know what is not read at all, and we thought it was a good article to be written, and why, what happened, and are we doing too much, right? That's something that you also say to us frequently, like, you produce so much that I can't read it. And if you add that to the rest of media that I like to have a look to every now and then, because we are your best and first option, right? But it is just too much, and how we kind of find new formats that help us, podcast, newsletter, join, subscribe to mine, new formats to disintoxicate ourselves to out of that abundance of information.
There's a wonderful playlist on Spotify, songs that no one has listened to, songs that never have been played on Spotify. And if you discover that and play a song, it disappears from the list. And it's so interesting to look at the songs that no one ever has listened to, and there's a lot of them. You can ask why.
You said before that you kept your newsroom very informed about the data in terms of subscriptions or audience. I don't know what generation your newsroom is, but your newspaper is old enough to have all types of generation. How did they react to that transition from print subscribers to digital subscribers and all what that means?
I think that people realized, we started this back in 2015 to 2016 to work in a new way. People realized that we were an industry in crisis. And people realized that if we don't do something about this, we're not going to survive. We cannot survive on ads alone. We cannot survive while seeing revenue goes to the global giants and so on. We have to do something. And while we were saying that we don't want to take away the good journalism, we also just want to make sure that it works. Actually, it was quite easy to get them to engage in this and to take pride in the development that, okay, people took a subscription based on my article. That's wonderful. Okay, if we put it behind paywall, perhaps we can reach fewer persons. That might be a problem in the beginning. But it can be readers that will read more of your stories, and you can use metrics in the newsroom that not just look at the vanity numbers of page views and clicks and so on, but on the quality of the engagement, on the reading times, on the completion rates and so on, to see that the work you do, it works. It's really good. People like it, and then it's not. You don't have the negative aspects of it. I'm being judged by numbers. People look at it completely differently now. But it's a change of culture, of course.
Yes, it is.
I have one thing on that. I think it's really interesting that the people here are editorial people talking about business, in the sense that for a very long time, rightly so, in certain cases, there was a very clear distinction in the newsroom between people who do the content and people who sell it. And that worked very well in many cases and was a reason for it. But now that we put the audience at the center, like that understanding of what motivates the audience, what makes them to convert, what makes them to follow you, is something that journalists need to think about and be aware. Because it's not just enough to say, I write my story, I do that, then I hit publish, and then I'm on to do the next story, because the job doesn't end that. So I think it's one of that cultural change, whatever, again, the use of data and how much journalists have access to the data is a big debate in many newsrooms, and many have different approaches. But fundamentally, the idea is that it's also your responsibility to understand how is your publication supported, and what's the model, and again, what clicks with the readers, like what, or the audience, whatever, like viewers, listeners. And so I think it's been part of a change in the industry that divide, even if it's not your job responsibility, you might not change your job, but the awareness of what drives the conversation has been a big part in many organizations have been driving that change and being much more forward-thinking.
Is there what clicks our audience? What I'll say. What are the moments where that click happened and why?
for us, national politics is definitely the core in quantity of the content we produce, but also in the appreciation and is the driver for many of our subscribers to support us. So yeah, if you look at our growth of the line of members growing and going back to 2012, it's a lovely growing, continuously growing curve, but you can see some peaks, and those peaks are obviously related to investigative scoops and news scoops on national politics. Apart from COVID, which I said before, if you take that away of the equation, the other ones are just scoops and investigative reports as well, very valued by our members. Every time we talk to them, they bring this out, the investigation, and how, because of our independence, we can do that, and we are free to publish things that maybe other media outlets are not so free to do, or cannot do it with the same, being so transparent about it, or with so much information. So yeah, definitely national politics is the core of our content. But thinking about that before, what you said, sports, and obviously we do cover other topics. And I think we still have to do that, because the whole elDiario is politics, but it's other things as well. And even though the majority of members might join us because of our national politics coverage, there's lots of them who also value other sections and also become members because of human rights section that we have, or
and actually we polled them and they say we want more international coverage.
Yeah, we want international coverage, and science.
Yeah. What do you think that we at national levels are missing in terms of content? In terms of what do you detect in your publication some issues that are worrying the people around Europe that you don't often read in national publication, or the national publication you often read? What is there to be discovered in terms of thematic?
Climate change is definitely a topic that is completely cross-border and that worries readers in almost every country in Europe. Another topic that has a lot of traction is housing, everything that has to do with housing. And we've seen different cross-border investigation that have to deal with housing. I would say the topics that worry the most are those who affect everyday life of citizens. So housing, of course. Climate change, to the extent in which it has a direct impact on their lives, like when you have floodings or droughts, and also topics related to energy and transportation. Those are typically cross-border topics, because the price of energy is soaring almost everywhere in Europe, and countries are applying different type of solutions to tackle that, be it accelerating the switch to accelerating the green transition, or subsidizing fossil fuels to compensate for the highest price. Basically those are the topics that worry the most Europeans. Then there are local issues that might be of interest to others because they are exemplary to some extent. For example, we run an investigation on the cultivation of the farming of avocado in southern Spain, which is also a consequence of climate change. But this story has driven a lot of interest from readers from other countries, because they didn't know that there were avocados farmed in Europe, and they didn't know it was possible, but now it is, sadly. Or that they are starting to grow wine in the UK, for example. These kind of topics that are a bit curious, but that affect immediately, that resonate with the citizens' worries and their daily life.
I really don't know how much time we have left. I assume 10 minutes or so. But I want Federica to share with us how much are we overlapping, are repeating the same mistakes in different projects around Europe regarding membership and subscriptions and this kind of relationship with the audience. Do you think that we could share more and fall for the same cliffs less?
We're coming from a morning of sharing challenges and successes and coming from an institute that tries to play that role of highlighting, bringing the evidence-based research, but facilitating conversation is in the spirit of we can avoid to make the same mistakes. Then it's not just really about one thing that might not work for elDiario, might work for Dagens Nyheter because of the markets are so different and because, the access to online news varies in the ways, but the thinking behind how did I think about the strategy, what did I learn about implementing it. So even if sometimes it's not the exact example that can just be replicated, I'll run exactly the same thing, the sharing of how did we get to that point, what did we learn, what did we not think about, what weren't expecting, can just spark a different idea that will allow a different publisher to say, that doesn't resonate to me in that context, but actually there is a connection with something else we're doing. And so, of course, coming from a very positive morning of collaborating and sharing, there is only more to do, I'm sure.
There were any assumptions that you had and pulled some actions for getting more members or readers that proved wrong? Anything that you can share that didn't work? And asking you three that has a direct contact with that kind of tactics. What kind of assumptions or things that you have done didn't reflect on any reaction?
Yeah, we made no mistakes at all.
Okay.
No, there's two things. There's two things I could mention. The first thing that we're actually wrestling with right now is simplicity or complexity. Is your offering simple enough? Is it really simple what you're asking readers to do? Because at The Guardian we have this contributions model, and then we also have an app, and we have a digital subscription, and very quickly we've learned through watching how, through UX research, we've watched how people interact with this and they're baffled. So that's a challenge for us. It's too complex. And the second mistake that I think we've been making a long time and we need to do better at is there's a huge effort to get people to join us, and then once they're in, we just sort of think, they're in, that's okay. I said to you this morning, and I'm making this number up, so please don't repeat it anywhere, but if we have 1.2 million supporters now, we've probably lost 1.2 million as well over the past 6 years, just by they're in, they're okay, we're not going to service them, we're not going to talk to them, and we've changed that in the last couple of years, and now we're getting quite assiduous about, are you okay, do you want a cup of tea, do you want anything else with that? Just looking after people and making them feel like they're not just a reader who gives us a tenner a month, they're a supporter who's important to us, really important to the whole fabric of what we do.
We at elDiario have a person who is responding to every email, complaint, and any question that they have, and that person is our editor-in-chief. That is true. Esther, tell us about that, but because it's amazing how much time he spends in that.
We're not overemploying him. We have a member support team as well. Yeah. He's not the only one answering emails, but he does. He does spend quite a good amount of his time talking to members, especially to those who are complaining about anything, and who take the time as well and the effort to send a letter explaining why they are not happy because of a publication or because of any other issue. And he does. We started doing this. We opened this completely channel of communication with him a few years ago, and when we did it, we knew that it was a lot of emails were going to come in through, and we were ready for that. And he does spend a lot of time. Yeah, so it is. That's what I mentioned before. That commitment, long-term commitment, requires strategies and teams and effort and money and time.
And when you do that, two things happen. When you get a supporter saying, I'm going to leave, I've had enough, you've not sent me an email in years, you've never listened to me. When you reply to them, two things happen. Firstly, they're a bit embarrassed and shocked. Oh my God, I didn't expect a human being to write back. Thank you very much, I'm still quite cross. And the second thing that happens is they go and tell all their friends. And you get this reputation of being an organization that listens and cares. And that's a virtuous circle.
Yeah, because you don't find that often.
No.
Getting people listening to you and when you complain and spending time. They appreciate that. We all do. Yeah.
Martin?
I think if we talk about general mistakes in the industry, I think there was, it's hard to generalize, but in 10, 12 years ago, everyone looked for what went viral. So virality was the general mistake. We said, okay, let's go after the click, the page view, the very shallow interest of the audience. We have probably made the same mistake. We working with paywalls during the past 5-6 years. Anything for a conversion, anything to get people in, and forget about looking at the cost side of it. Forget about looking at are they really someone who should be a subscriber? Do we really have what's relevant to them? I think that today we have learned from all these mistakes we've done and all the testing we've done. We experiment constantly with different ways to see how it works, and try to look more at the real value for the user. Do we provide the user with real value? Do they really appreciate what we are doing here? Is it worth something to them? If we focus on that relationship, I think we can build a much more sustainable long-term relation and forget about the quick wins.
I think that's a very good final reflection.
Yeah.
Forget about the quick wins and let's try to build a stable and independent relationship between us and our readership. Thank you all. Thank you very much. Please.
Thank you.
Let's thank them for their support and participation. And that's it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting us, those of you that are socios of elDiario or any other publication here. Otherwise, please do. And I think that we had a very good morning of ARPUs, funnels, and technicalities, but also motivation and a kind of group therapy too. And a very, very, I hope, interesting afternoon of debating and sharing with you. Thank you, and see you in the second encounter for European journalism. Thank you.